Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. If you have any questions at all during this webinar, go ahead and write those questions in the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side. We're going to try to get to all questions today during the session. If we, for some reason, don't have time to get to all of them, we will respond to you individually after the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything started. I'd like to introduce first Chris Wright. He is the VP of Sales for Baseline Irrigation here at HydroPoint. So Chris, over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Meg. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're very excited to share some information with you. This is part of our Thought Leadership webinar series where we bring experts from various fields in to share their best practices and experiences in their profession. For those of you that are not familiar with HydroPoint, we are a smart management solution company that offers various products and services, one of which is Baseline Irrigation Systems and Technology, which specializes in soil moisture sensing. And soil moisture sensing is a fantastic engineered solution for green roof applications, and we're excited to talk in depth with both Andy Humphrey and Nate Griswold on green roofs and experiences with installation and maintenance and some of the trials and challenges that go along with that. So Andy, I'd like to turn it over to you to introduce Nate, and we'll begin the discussion.
Awesome, appreciate that, Chris. Well, Nate, welcome to the webinar here today. Like to introduce you. I think it was back in 2006 you and I first met back when you were working for American Hydrotech, and I'd like to kind of understand maybe how you got into green roofs and then a little bit about the company that you have founded and operate today.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind since we first met there in Chicago when I was with Hydrotech. I first learned about green roofs while I was at Michigan State University. I was pursuing my degree in landscape architecture, and some of the earliest research in North America was being performed at that time at Michigan State, and I was lucky enough to learn about the technology then. And so I learned about them, about green roofs and what they were and how they functioned at that point. There wasn't a lot of curriculum built around that at Michigan State at the time. So I wanted to learn more, and I inserted myself as a college student into the industry and attended actually the very first Green Roofs for Healthy Cities conference that was held in Chicago. And that's when I was introduced. I believe that was 2003. That I learned that I went to that event. So it's been, this is the 20th year or 18th year that I've been involved in the industry. And a lot of people that I know that are collaborators at this point, I met 18 years ago. There's been some people that have come and gone, but there's definitely the old school practitioners that are still around. So, you know, and I worked for, post-college, I worked for American Hydrotech, one of the leaders in green roof technology and waterproofing solutions. I spent 8 years as their senior technical person and worked on sales all around the world. And then about 7.5 years ago, I came home to Traverse City, Michigan, and started in Habitat. And we focus on designing, building, and growing all forms of green infrastructure, including green roofs. So I've used my understanding and the technical aspects of green roofs to pursue installations and designs here in Michigan, and it's been going great. So
excellent, excellent. Well, you have a deep background, many years in the industry, and it sounds like you've worked on projects all over the US and all over the world. And our topic for today is green roofs, what we might call 101. So the plan is not to go really super detailed, but kind of stay more in that 10,000 foot view. So I think one of the first things we might want to talk about really is, what is a green roof?
Well, a green roof, there's a technical term. But I'll just tell a little backstory on that. It took, I believe, 7 or 8 years of working with ASTM, where leaders from the waterproofing and green roofing industry would come together every 6 months to talk about how to define green roofs, or what they were. Then Green Roofs for Healthy Cities had the similar thing. So it basically is a vegetative surface over a waterproof structure. So it's a specialized engineered solution to grow vegetation over waterproofing. So that could be like Millennium Center or Millennium Park in Chicago. That is technically a green roof because it's over a waterproof structure. There's multiple floors of parking below, but it also can be on the roof of a building. Basically, it's a lightweight engineered solution to grow plants over waterproofing.
Got it. Well, that's valuable, because I guess if you say green roof, it could mean a lot of things. So it's nice to know that there is at least some sort of a standard, which is a vegetated roof over a waterproofed membrane. So appreciate that information. The next thing we might want to talk about before we get into the different types of green roofs, which we will talk about, what are some of the benefits? Why would somebody consider putting in a green roof?
Well, there's many benefits. There's some that may or may not matter to certain clients, but ultimately the benefits that are coming along with a green roof are triple bottom line. You'll find economic benefits, environmental benefits, and social benefits. The most popular, or the ones that are driving most of the market, are stormwater related. Green roofs are very effective stormwater management tools. It's a form of green infrastructure. And so that is an environmental and/or economic and social benefit. But overall, managing water in my world, is the #1 driver of the growth of the industry. And I would say, in my opinion, the second most popular reason is aesthetics. The owner may not really need to deal with the water. They don't need to meet a certain ordinance requirement, but they would like the look of the green roof, or they want to put a plaza up on the rooftop, a living space. So an aesthetic requirement, a piece of the architecture. That's another one. So those two are the main drivers. And I would say, the third is, is just, I guess it's sort of was tied into that aesthetic, is just usable space. Meaning, most new developments have some form of rooftop plaza, most commercial buildings. I'm seeing projects all over the state of Michigan, everything from private foundational work for a private foundation, to hospitals, to hotels, to multifamily units. All of those, they're doing something with their rooftop. It's
Excellent.
Additional living space that they don't have to have on the ground. It's private space up on the roof.
Awesome. So I heard a couple things I'll just recap on. There's a triple bottom line benefit, which is just awesome. I love that phrase, triple bottom line, which is economic, environmental, and social benefits. And then you spoke to stormwater and managing water on the roof and on the site as an important piece. So maybe we can touch back on that a little bit later on. So that's really helpful on some of the reasons why somebody would consider installing a green roof. Let's now talk about the different types of green roof, because I've seen various types and I don't always know what they're called or how to refer to them. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different, I guess the industry, we're fairly small, but there are different marketing pitches or people, different deviations from what you see on your screen here. But the main types are extensive, which is a shallow, lightweight assembly. It's going to be 18 to 35 pounds typically at full saturation. This is going to be a lower plant diversity, meaning not as many plants can grow in that shallow depth of soil or growing media. And then the other, and again, these just having two here is a simplified version of defining roof types, is intensive. That it's more intensive weight. It's going to typically be 8+ inches of growing media. It's going to be on the heavier side during saturation, and you really can plant almost anything if the soil or growing media is deep enough.
Mhm.
This is good for a a planter or some type of deeper media depth. So there are versions of green roofs that are lawns, like you would see on the ground. People mow roofs. There's going to be variations between intensive and extensive that some call semi-intensive rooftops. But for the most part, I'm talking extensive and intensive. And
Okay.
and the way to remember that is intensive is more intensive weight. It's greater depth. There's more saturated weight there. So that's a really easy way to remember it, the differences.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be involved in a project in California, the Facebook corporate office and their green roof. Definitely an intensive application. It's 13 acres and it's like you're on a park on top of the building with full caliper trees and intense or extensive plantings associated with it. So yeah, that makes total sense.
Definitely, yeah, and that's actually that was a project that I started to work on right as I was departing Hydrotech. That one was, I saw some of the first drawings of that, and I believe Hydrotech is the basis of design there, the waterproofing and a lot of the components there, which is it's great.
Yeah.
Large scale project right there that not many people have seen, so that's lucky.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So we've got the two main buckets: extensive, which is the shallow; intensive, which is the deeper depth of soil, or what you might call engineered media, soil media. How can you talk a little bit about the role that both soil and perhaps irrigation play in a green roof in those applications?
Yeah, the really important part of soil design or growing media design is making sure that it's not going to compact over time. Because you're on a rooftop, it's very expensive and logistically challenging to get anything back up there after construction. So you want to make sure that your growing media or your soil is at equilibrium, meaning the compost percentage is very dialed in. You know how much organic material is within your compost. You know the types of lightweight aggregates and sands that are going to be there, because you do not want that profile of your growing media to break down. If you have too much organic material, your profile will break down and compact over time, and your drainage will be affected because your pore spaces are being reduced, and overall the system will not function as designed. So I used to design blends from all over the country when I was working nationally at a more regular basis, and fine tuning the types of how much sand, how much compost, and all that was it's soil science. So you needed to understand that, and by the very nature of the media, it's very porous. You want a lot of airspace there, so it quickly drains. You want water off the roof. You want saturation. You want your green roof media to hold some water, but you still need it to drain. So that does make a challenge or pose a challenging a challenge that has to be overcome with irrigation. Traditional drip irrigation, for instance, will move horizontally in a growing bed on the ground. In green roof media, and this is in general terms, there's always exceptions, but drip irrigation, the water goes straight down. There's no horizontal movement. You have to overcome that. And because most of these roofs are being designed to manage stormwater, we want to hold water there. That also is something that I work with irrigation designers, landscape architects, and everyone to make sure that the plants stay alive by adding irrigation. But we're not going to be irrigating those plants every day like you would on the ground. The water will be within the profile of your media. It may be down in the bottom in your water retention layer, and it can evapotranspire up through the media. So it is still there, but you need to just really understand the requirements of your plants, and then dial in your irrigation system, potentially with a soil moisture sensor, to then know when you need it. So so you're not just irrigating to irrigate. You want to make sure that you're keeping them a little thirsty out there, the plants.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so I always like.
I can imagine the real-time data would be very important for that, right? Because it could drastically change in a short period of time in that engineered soil at that exposure, right?
Right.
So having a soil moisture sensor that can respond in time is important.
Right. Yeah. So a sophisticated timer, something, a weather station, whatever it is, those are becoming more and more popular. I see it in more and more specifications, both for green roofs and green walls. So understanding that is important, and we are putting these in. The ultimate goal is these should be a resilient, sustainable system. And by just dumping water all the time, regardless if the plants or the media needs any more moisture, is not doing anything for the environment. But with that said, I am a fan. There are some people in my industry that never irrigate. Their green roofs are hand watered the day that they're installed, and maybe for the first year of plant establishment, but there's no dedicated irrigation system, and that can work. I have plenty of projects that are that way, but I like to think if you're investing into a green roof, which is more expensive than standard roofing, and you're also investing into the structural capacity of your building to hold the green roof, you should put in an irrigation system, which is fairly low cost in comparison to the overall system you're putting in already. Even if it's only turned on during times of drought, you still have it there. And it's very easy to put it in during construction versus a year down the road when the plants die. So really, some form of irrigation, even if it's just a hose bib, has to be on the roof. There has to be some water.
Yeah. So Chris started to talk a little bit about what we're seeing with the demand for soil moisture sensors on rooftops. And I think it parallels really nicely into what you started to talk about as it relates to stormwater management, because we're seeing more and more attention to the moisture on the rooftop and not overwatering or oversaturating that soil profile, because a lot of green roof maintenance companies want to make sure that there's room for the rain, because if that green roof is your quote unquote stormwater management system, as you mentioned, you don't want to be filling up the soil profile really ever, let alone Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like a traditional irrigation system would run, just simply based on time. And so we're seeing that demand for moisture sensors on the rooftop to help with that real-time data to make sure that that profile is not being flooded full of water, so that it can be used as designed as that stormwater management system.
Right. Yeah, and I like to think of it as a sponge. That's an analogy I always use because everyone can visualize it. If you think of a dry kitchen sponge, and there's a lot of water holding potential in that sponge. And if that is representing your growing media, you never want the irrigation to make that sponge saturated. You may give it a little bit of water and you see no drips coming off the bottom of the sponge because it's fully held within that sponge.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the media. You want to give it just a little bit to keep the moisture. You don't want it to get hydrophobic to where it won't hold any water. The sponge, if you leave it out in the sun, it will curl up and you can't get water back in it. So you need to, understand that. But you also want that sponge to have as much capacity as possible when it rains, like you said. And it's really important to know if that green roof was designed to hold, like if the water holding capacity of that roof is part of the overall site design for stormwater management. If the civil engineer is looking to that to hold 50% of a 10-year storm or something, you have to have that capacity available. And there are breakdowns that happen between the engineer and the landscape architect or irrigation designer that ultimately the management of that roof is not what it should be, and there could be downstream issues because that roof is not doing what it's designed to do.
Right. If it wasn't installed or managed to the design intent of the architect or engineer, I could completely see that happening. And that actually is a good segue. So thanks for leading us in this direction. Let's talk about maintenance of a green roof. And I think for this topic, let's talk about maintenance of the extensive, because intensive, I'm just going to assume, is more like maintaining a landscape. Let's talk about green roofs in the extensive.
Sure. The image that's up here now is the Cancer Center, the Cowell Family Cancer Center in Traverse City, Michigan. This is a great example of a roof that's designed to hold water. Its main goal. This is a part of an overall green infrastructure initiative of the campus there at Munson Medical Center, and the ultimate goal is to help increase the quality of the stream that's just behind this building. But yeah, this is an extensive roof. These are all different varieties of sedum, alliums, and other drought-tolerant extensive plants. And you can see my crew up there in this image. And what we're doing is we're pulling weeds. We're checking to make sure that the drains aren't clogged. We're making sure that there's no areas that have been getting scoured by the wind and growing media has been dispersed around the roof. Basically just reporting on what's going there. There may be birds nesting there, or there's some issue that with a fungus growing on all of the plants and it's killing them, or the irrigation system is locked on. That's another thing that could be an issue. Like there's a broken head. Actually, on the same campus, not this exact roof, but on the same campus 2 days ago, my crew was there doing maintenance, and there was an irrigation head that had been kicked by somebody else. And when I'm just guessing, when the irrigation system kicked on, that was just shooting water up off the top of there. So I don't know if there's any sensors out there that can tell you if it's just running, if it's pumping more gallons.
You and I need to talk more often, man. We got to talk more often. We definitely have some solutions that can help you out. About how often are you up on that rooftop?
That we're doing monthly, that particular one. And after they're established, we'd like to do during the growing season, once a month is our ideal. And even in that time, a lot of weeds can grow in a 30-day period. But we try to do that there's one client that actually they wanted to back it down to 3 visits a year. So we go there in early spring or mid-spring after the first flowers and leaves have started to break, midsummer, July, and then late September.
Okay.
So that's a minimum. But
Okay.
but you know, we're pulling what is called a weed, but some people may want to let the roof naturalize, where the only weeds are something that is a taproot tree that is going to cause issue with the water potentially. So some people might want a dandelion up there, and the next person doesn't. So
Okay.
what we're doing is helping define what that customer considers a weed, because not everyone's definition of a weed is different. So.
Cool. Let's see. So before we move on to some of the Q&As that we're going to get to here in a minute, are there some best practices or standards and things that people should keep in mind if they're looking to design, install, or maintain a green roof?
Yeah, I mean, I just had a call today. Number one is, if you're thinking about this, regardless if it's commercial, residential, if it's new build or a retrofit project, I always want to see a structural analysis by a qualified engineer or an architect. Like, that is the number one thing. I will not work on a project that does not have somebody taking responsibility for the loading of the roof. I'm not an engineer. I know a lot about engineering, and but I'm not an engineer. I'm not stamping a drawing. That is all on the ownership team / design team. So that's the number one best practice, is always have an engineer. Always use a quality waterproofing. If you're putting this down on a retrofit project, make sure you're consulting with somebody like in Habitat that can help you determine if that waterproofing is in good shape or not before you cover it up. If you've been patching holes in it for 20 years, it's probably not the best roof to put a saturated sponge over. So that's an important part. And then also roof access. Like, how are you going to get up there? How is the soil going to get up under the roof? How are the plants going to get there? And then how are you going to get there at maintenance, at the maintenance time of maintenance? And then safety is another one too. You can't be putting people on a rooftop if you don't have code OSHA barriers, so that's another best practice. And then also, plant, making sure you are working with a qualified green roof professional to help with everything from plant selection and overall drainage components. Like, what are you doing to drain it? Do you have a root barrier underneath your green roof? Is there a maintenance plan in place or specified? And then water source is another really important one. So, I want to make sure that on any of my projects, all of those bases are covered at a minimum.
Okay. That's a good list. That's a really good list.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, I think like I said, we started this about Green Roofs 101. I think we've covered a lot of the 10,000 foot view topics about a green roof. What is a green roof? The types of green roofs, maintenance, best practices. And I think it's time to open it up for some questions. I know we've had a couple that have already chimed in here. So let's see. Why don't I just hit you with the first question, Nate, that's coming in. It actually has to do with certifications. Are there certifications for green roofs? How would somebody learn and get involved with that?
Yeah, there are. There's a few different ones that come to mind, but the most prevalent is Green Roof Professional Certification, GRP. That is a certification or accreditation that is through Green Roofs for Healthy Cities, which is our trade organization. And you take a series of courses that are available online now, and then you need to take a test afterwards. I believe there is and I don't know the exact cost or anything, but I believe there's one package you can pay for that you can take online courses and test from your home. And I was lucky enough to be one of the first GRPs, and I actually helped write a lot of the questions and the guidebook. But they still made me take the test, even though I helped write the questions.
At least you knew all the answers.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So so that's a really common one. But then you
Okay.
can also, there's other types of training. There's other independent training organizations that I work with that I'm actually was working on it earlier today. I'm doing, it's called Half Moon Education. It's something to look up. It's for continuing education credits. It's not a designated certification at the end, but you can get continuing education credits. I'm teaching about energy efficient, sustainable roofs. It's an 8-hour program next week, over 2 days. And I'm also, there's various other things I do with them. So, and yeah, and there's other similar organizations out there that you can take online webinars that will help you with this. So
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Let's see.
Andy, sorry to interrupt for a second. So I did want to just kind of loop everybody in here. We've been talking about some amazing things about green roofs with the soil, with the plants. HydroPoint also has a baseline irrigation solution that is actually great for these green roofs. I know that that has the soil moisture sensors. Again, Chris was talking about that real-time data. So Chris and Andy, can you guys just kind of like briefly touch on what the baseline irrigation controllers, just kind of an overview about them, and also how they would probably be a great solution for the green roof deployments?
Awesome. Andy, why don't you take that?
Okay, let me put these questions here that are coming in off to the side. So on a rooftop application, Nate spoke to a couple of the solutions that we offer. The first one is soil moisture sensing technology, and that can be used to manage both the dry side of the soil profile and the wet side and anywhere in between, so that you know minute by minute exactly where your soil profile is, the moisture in your soil profile. That type of data can be plumbed up to our cloud hosted software solution. So you can look at this real-time data from anywhere in the world, from any web browser. That can be your computer, tablet, phone. And then we also integrate the hydraulic and flow information, so we can shut down in the event of a break. So Nate, what you mentioned before about that sprinkler head that had come dislodged, we can notify you that it's happened, and we can close the valve and or master valve to shut off the system so it doesn't continue to run down the drain. And then we also offer a number of other, let's call them data sensors, one of which is pressure. You can measure the pressure up there. The soil moisture sensors also give you the temperature of the roof. So if you're trying to maintain the roof at a little bit cooler temperature, oftentimes that evaporation of water and transpiration can be used in a cooling effect, and so we can measure that as well. So really what we do is we operate irrigation systems, i.e. valves, but we use real-time data from sensor devices and give you tools that you can use remotely to manage that green roof, so that, like you mentioned, Nate, if roof access is a problem, you don't have to climb 20 flights of stairs and then a ladder up onto this rooftop to fix that irrigation system. You can do it from the comfort of your office or your home. So that's a little bit about what we do. Of course, we do a whole lot more. Anybody that's interested can visit baselinesystems.com and catch up with us offline. And Chris, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think from a sustainable perspective, another thing that we excel at is the management of secondary water sources. So I was looking at the picture of the rooftop that you maintain. I had a question: are those permeable pavers up top? And if so, is that water that drains through there from rainfall events captured and then utilized to irrigate the green roof itself? So it's like a fully sustainable circuit of irrigation. So that's something else that we manage very well and can manage an empty condition if there is an extensive drought condition that would empty that cistern. We can switch to a different water source. So Definitely a product capable of offering engineered solutions for simple applications, and then definitely more complex, depending on the design intent, like Andy mentioned, of the project itself.
Do you want me to answer the question about the pavers?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah, those are actually called pedestal pavers, and they're not permeable through the paver itself,
Okay.
but there are quarter-inch gap every 2 foot, so the water falls down between them, freely falls down to the roof deck, and then moves towards the drains. And to be very honest, I don't believe this. I believe this water goes. There are some rain gardens at grade. I'm not sure if these are connected to that or not. They may go into the storm drains. I wasn't involved in that aspect of the job, but I definitely see more and more projects that would collect that water, or there might be a blue roof under those pavers, meaning just no vegetation, just a reservoir to hold water, with the drains having a controlled flow out of it, meaning the water will be held. And again, that is more for a storm design, for civil engineering, but sometimes that water will go into a cistern or some other type of a rain garden or a chamber below a parking lot, and then be used for something else down the road.
Yeah, interesting. Very cool.
Very cool. Okay, here's we had another question that came in. Do
Sure.
rooftops have microclimates like landscapes often do?
Yes, most definitely. Depending on where, that the picture of the Munson project you showed, for instance, has there's 3 roof areas, and there's one that's around the other side of the building that the majority of that roof is heavily shaded until about 1:30 in the afternoon. And that's because of how the sun rises and sets. So those plants back there, the entire roof was planted with a similar palette of plants. The plants that are doing better back there are more shade-loving plants. And the ones that are on the other side that are full sun all day are the more sun-loving, drought-tolerant plants. So that's a microclimate itself, and so that the angle of the building or the neighboring building may cause shade that would create a microclimate, or a tree nearby the roof could create sun shade, and that could change the amount of sun getting through there. If it's early spring, there's more sun going through the branches of that maple before, and hitting that roof. And then in the summer, less sun's getting to that. You can also get it based on, the type of the shade being casted by the plants, or wind breaks that a plant is providing on a roof. And then speaking of wind, where the predominant winds are, you may be able to have a shrub that would love a certain corner on the roof, but you need to think as a designer, where are the predominant northerly winds in the wintertime? And will that tree be able to live up there? So most there are microclimates that you need. In a lot of times, I sort of scattershot, with sedum plants, for instance. You put down a growing media with 12 or 15 different, not a growing media, I'm sorry, a rolled out mat of sedum. And out of the 15 that come in that, 6 might live. And that's because each roof's slightly different. So, that's why you shoot, I call it a scatter shot. You throw a couple, 15 varieties at it at once, and you see what thrives based on the
dominant. Yeah. Interesting.
Great.
Very
Okay.
Cool. I've got another
Moving
question
on.
here.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Came in pretty straightforward, but does an existing asphalt shingle roof qualify as waterproofing under a green roof?
No. You'd have to take that off and put some other type of either a built-up roof, a single layer of PVC or TPO or EPDM. Those are all single ply systems that would be laid down onto that roof. So you would need to redo, and it's because shingles, water could migrate underneath the shingle. A shingle's made to shed off water, not hold it on the roof.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. How do you have any tips or best practices for establishing a roof as it relates to water? You know, watering the plants, I
Yeah,
guess is the question.
Yeah, I mean, there's very most manufacturers that there's a lot of manufacturers, a lot of companies, a lot more than 2006 when we met, Andy. But there's a lot of people in the marketplace that just don't that want to do green roofs, but they don't really understand horticulture. And then there's a lot of folks out there that do understand horticulture, and there's very clear guidelines coming from the manufacturer of what they want from an irrigation standpoint. So, best practices, if you have to know how this plant will establish itself, how quickly it will establish itself. Putting down a sedum carpet, for instance, you want to cool that growing media down, be it with an irrigation system, a hand water overhead with a hose bib, something to cool down that growing media before you put your plants into it. So that's a day one best practice is make sure you're not planting a nursery grown plant into scorching hot growing media. Get that evaporative cooling going on from the plant or from the water. The water. There's calculations of how much the evaporation process is what's cooling that roof down. So that's a good practice.
Is there? There's another question. Very similar to that. What percent of the sedums or the plants do you basically see that will, let's say, will survive? Is it 100%, 80%?
What's an acceptable loss?
Oh, the coverage rate on a sedum extensive roof.
Just like, I guess the other way to answer the question could be the expectable loss of plants. Yeah.
It's going to happen. Like I said, when you put the sedum carpet down, you're going to have a little bit of loss. And by loss, I mean number of species, or varieties of sedum. I mean, so you may lose 50% of the total number that you started with. So 15 varieties of sedum, you might start with that, but in 2 years you might only have 6, and that's because the most dominant in that microclimate have taken over. And so that's again that scatter shot. You push as much as you can towards the roof, and then something's going to take hold. So there's not really I guess an industry standard that I use on that, but there's so that's really, I guess, a point to something to point out is if you're planting in if you're planting all one plant, a monoculture, you need a diverse planting palette.
That'd be risky. Yeah.
If you're planting all one type of plant, you're going to really need to understand how that plant will survive, what water requirements are there. So, typically that comes with intensive roofs. There's going to be more intensive irrigation systems too, so you may need to run zones based on the plants that you've selected.
Okay. Chris, you seen anything else on your side? Questions coming in?
No.
Yeah, looking pretty good here too.
I will remind everybody that if we didn't get to your questions live, or if you still have one, please put it into the question box and we'll get to it and answer it post webinar as well. So We want to thank you all for joining us. Nate, thanks for being our special guest. That was a lot of really good information, and you obviously have a lot of expertise in the field. We appreciate you sharing that with us. Everybody, if you would like more information, either from Nate or from Baseline regarding green roofs and implementation of either practices or technology, don't hesitate to contact us. Baseline, info@baselinesystems.com, and at Inhabitech, info@inhabitech.com. So once again, we appreciate everybody joining us. We know your time is valuable, but we feel this is fantastic information, and we hope to speak to you soon. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Roger.
your time, Nate.
Thanks, Andy.
See you guys later.
Yep.